The Edmund Fitzgerald.
A 729-foot ore carrier,
transporting iron ore when it ran into high winds,
which apparently broke apart and
sank in Lake Superior. 46 years ago today, the SS Edmund Fitzgerald sank in Lake Superior. All 29 crew members aboard died.
You'd seen pictures of the Fitzgerald, but had no idea how intact it would be.
46 years ago today, the SS Edmund Fitzgerald sank in Lake Superior. All 29 crew members aboard died.
Beneath the icy waves of Lake Superior lies a tragedy frozen in time. Nearly 50 years after the Edmund Fitzgerald vanished in a violent November storm,
a freighter carrying a crew of 29 disappeared on Lake Superior during a severe storm last night, and so far, no survivors have been found.
The questions surrounding its sudden disappearance still echo through maritime history. It was the largest ship on the Great Lakes when it sank without a distress call, taking all 29 crew members with it.
When one of its officers radioed a nearby steamer to say the Fitzgerald was taking on water and had lost 2 hatch covers. Shortly after that, the freighter disappeared.
Now, in a daring new expedition, a team of underwater engineers and historians has returned to the wreck using state-of-the-art drone technology. Their goal: uncover what truly caused the freighter's catastrophic end. As the drone descends into the cold, black depths, it captures images so startling that even the experts fall silent. One thing is clear: something was missed in earlier investigations. The Edmund Fitzgerald still haunts Lake Superior, not just as a ghost ship, but as a mystery begging to be solved. What they discovered changes everything. The Edmund Fitzgerald, Pride and Tragedy. When she was launched in 1958, the SS Edmund Fitzgerald was hailed as a marvel of engineering. Stretching 729 feet from bow to stern, she was the largest freighter on the Great Lakes at the time and among the most respected. Built by Great Lakes Engineering Works in River Rouge, Michigan, and owned by Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company, the Fitzgerald was known for her size, speed, and striking appearance. Her gleaming white superstructure and deep red hull became iconic. For 17 years, she hauled taconite iron ore from mines near Duluth, Minnesota, to ports across the Great Lakes, making hundreds of trips without incident. Her crew, seasoned and proud, called her the pride of the American side. She was also popular with onlookers. Many gathered to watch her pass beneath the Mackinac Bridge or glide into port. Captain Ernest McSorley, a veteran of the lakes, commanded her final voyage. On November 9, 1975, the Fitzgerald left Superior, Wisconsin, loaded with over 26,000 tons of iron pellets and bound for Detroit. Another freighter, the Arthur M. Anderson, traveled close behind. The weather that day was volatile, but forecasts underestimated the system brewing over Lake Superior. Within 24 hours, winds exceeded 70 miles per hour and waves towered over 25 feet. Despite the worsening storm, McSorley kept the ship moving, determined to reach shelter. On November 10th, shortly after 7:10 p.m., the Fitzgerald vanished from radar. The Anderson had just received McSorley's final words: "We are holding our own." Moments later, nothing. No SOS, no emergency flares, just silence. Search and rescue missions recovered only wreckage. No bodies. The Fitzgerald was later found broken in two, resting 530 feet below the surface. The tragedy stunned the nation. Families were left without answers. Theories emerged: rogue waves, structural failure, poor hatch design, but none provided absolute clarity. Today, the Edmund Fitzgerald still haunts Lake Superior, not just as a ship lost to a storm, but as a case marked by silence, speed, and confusion. In the decades since, many have searched for meaning, for closure, but until now, one piece of the puzzle remained buried, out of sight, in the cold grasp of the lake. In the decades following the Edmund Fitzgerald's tragic demise, multiple investigations were launched by the U.S. Coast Guard, the National Transportation Safety Board, and private researchers. Each offered theories, but none fully agreed on the cause. The U.S. Coast Guard's 1977 report suggested that water likely entered through improperly fastened or damaged cargo hatch covers during the storm. The NTSB offered a more structural explanation, proposing that the ship may have broken apart on the surface due to stress. Families of the crew members, meanwhile, rejected the hatch theory, fearing it implied crew negligence. The true cause remained elusive. As time passed, technology improved. In the 1980s and 1990s, submersible dives captured grainy footage of the wreck. Later, side-scan sonar produced basic maps of the ship's location, her two halves resting about 170 feet apart on the lake bed. But these early dives lacked precision and clarity, leaving many features unexplored or misinterpreted. By the 2000s and 20s, a new generation of researchers emerged: marine archaeologists, structural engineers, and AI-assisted oceanographers. One consortium, backed by NOAA and a Great Lakes maritime history nonprofit, proposed a bold plan: return to the wreck site with modern tools capable of capturing millimeter-level detail in near-total darkness. They assembled a specialized team, including underwater drone pilots, deep lake engineers, and forensic naval architects. Their star instrument was a state-of-the-art ROV remotely operated vehicle, equipped with Ultra HD cameras, sonar scanners, and manipulators capable of retrieving small objects. The drone was fitted with AI-assisted scanning systems capable of building 3D models in real time. The mission had two goals. First, to document the full extent of the ship's structural damage in greater detail than ever before. Second, to search for features that had either never been captured or never fully understood, particularly around the cargo hatches and hull seams. There was a sense of reverence among the crew. No one treated the expedition as mere data gathering. This was a memorial, a grave site. Many had personal connections to the Fitzgerald legend, family stories, hometown lore, or careers inspired by the mystery. As the barge positioned itself over the known wreck coordinates, silence fell among the team. After nearly 5 decades, the Edmund Fitzgerald was about to speak again. The drone descends. The sun hadn't yet risen when the remotely operated vehicle, ROV, was gently lowered into Lake Superior's frigid blackness. The water was calm on the surface, a deceptive calm that belied the fury that had swallowed the Edmund Fitzgerald nearly half a century before. As the drone's tether unspooled, it sank slowly into the darkness, its lights cutting narrow cones through the silty water. More than 500 feet below, the pressure was immense, and the temperature hovered just above freezing. Visibility was near zero without artificial light. But the ROV was prepared. Equipped with 6 high-lumen floodlights, a suite of sonar and 4K imaging sensors, and precision maneuvering thrusters, it was designed for this kind of work. Delicate, respectful, and meticulous. On board the surface vessel, engineers and researchers huddled around glowing monitors. At first, there was little to see but suspended sediment and long-dead organisms drifting in slow-motion currents. Then, a massive steel structure began to take shape in the gloom. "There she is," someone whispered. The drone's cameras revealed the Edmund Fitzgerald's twisted wreckage, lying like a broken cathedral on the lake bed. The bow section stood eerily upright, embedded deep in the sediment. Its 3 cargo hatches, long rusted, seemed frozen in time. The stern, torn and scattered, rested upside down at a short distance away. Nothing about the scene looked violent, and that was perhaps the most unsettling part. It was as though the ship had simply drifted down and settled into silence. The ROV began a slow, systematic survey, tracing the starboard side of the hull. Tiny fish darted past the camera. Along the railing, the drone's arm reached out to brush away years of sediment, revealing the vessel's faded name, Fitzgerald. The crew remained silent. For some, it was their first time seeing the legendary wreck with their own eyes, no longer just photos or sonar scans, but a real place where real men had died. Then, the drone passed over the cargo hatch array. On a monitor, a team member noticed something odd. "Back it up 3 feet," she said. The operator complied. What came into view would change the mission's focus, and perhaps rewrite the final chapter of the Fitzgerald story: the missing hatch clamps. As the ROV glided slowly over the Edmund Fitzgerald's bow, the silence in the control room grew heavier. The drone's lights illuminated the forward deck, revealing steel that had not seen daylight in nearly 50 years. Covered in silt and rust, it bore the quiet dignity of a ship that had died serving its purpose. But then the camera panned across the cargo hatches, massive rectangular steel doors that had once sealed in tens of thousands of tons of iron ore, and one of the engineers leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "There," he said, pointing to the monitor. "That clamp's not just corroded, it's gone." The team began calling out measurements and camera angles as the ROV adjusted its position, hovering directly over the forwardmost hatch cover. It was immediately obvious to anyone with experience in ship design or lake freighters, multiple heavy-duty steel clamps, meant to hold the hatch tightly closed, were either entirely missing or warped beyond recognition. Some appeared to have been ripped away. Others were bent backwards, like broken fingers. Each of the Fitzgerald's 21 hatch covers had been secured with 22 clamps. That's over 450 steel clamps designed to keep those doors sealed against even the most violent conditions. Their role was critical. Without them, heavy waves crashing across the deck could force water through even a tiny seam. In the pounding chaos of a storm like the one that swallowed the Fitzgerald, a failed clamp, or 10, could mean disaster. But what stunned the team wasn't just the absence of these clamps. It was the location of the failure. This was the forwardmost hatch, situated closest to the bow, the part of the ship most exposed to the storm's fury. And right next to it, another troubling sight. A shattered air vent pipe, one of the long steel tubes that allowed air circulation into the cargo hold. It was gone. Sheared off completely at its base, it left a jagged hole in the deck. The pipe hadn't just corroded. It had been wrenched off by an enormous force, likely a combination of structural weakness and repeated blows from waves estimated at over 25 feet high. The implications were chilling. "That right there," murmured one of the engineers, breaking the silence, "is how she sank." The team immediately pulled up archived audio from the Coast Guard's records. At 3:30 p.m. on the day of the disaster, Captain McSorley had radioed that the Fitzgerald had a bad list, that it had lost a vent, and that one of the hatches was leaking a little, but under control. But now, as the drone continued its slow pass, it became obvious that the situation was never under control. The missing clamps, the torn vent, and the visible warping in the steel hatch cover all pointed to a more dire scenario. The Fitzgerald was taking on water, and likely had been for hours before it vanished. The U.S. Coast Guard's 1977 report concluded that water probably entered through ineffective or damaged hatch covers, ultimately flooding the forward holds and destabilizing the ship. But others, especially the families of the lost crew, pushed back. They believed the ship was sound, and that blaming the crew for not securing hatches was a deflection from deeper flaws in the ship's design or external forces like rogue waves. Over the years, competing theories gained traction. That the ship had struck a shoal, or that it suffered a catastrophic structural failure mid-lake, breaking in two on the surface before it could send out a call for help. But this new footage, sharper and more comprehensive than anything previously captured, painted a sobering picture. As the drone moved on to the second and third hatches, the same pattern emerged. Clamps missing or bent out of alignment, and signs of repeated structural trauma on the forward deck. Sediment trails along the inside edges of the hatch coaming suggested sustained water flow. Worse still, some of the clamps appeared to have been retrofitted or replaced in years past, hinting at a history of wear that may have been underappreciated. If even a few of those clamps failed under the weight of crashing waves, water could have begun flooding the hold in massive quantities. And in a bulk carrier carrying over 26,000 tons of ore, even a modest list or forward tilt could destabilize the vessel within minutes. A structural engineer on the team offered a grim assessment. "The most terrifying thing isn't that the ship was hit by something catastrophic. It's that it probably died slowly, and no one on board realized how bad it was until it was too late." The discovery was so compelling that even skeptics of the hatch failure theory had to reconsider. Multiple experts on the expedition agreed that the damage observed was consistent with progressive flooding, not a sudden breakup or violent collision, and it aligned with a growing body of forensic maritime evidence that supported this slower, more insidious cause. Perhaps most haunting of all was the possibility that the Fitzgerald's crew, confident in their ship's strength and unaware of the extent of the damage, genuinely believed they were holding their own when McSorley gave his final radio transmission, that they may have had no idea they were minutes from vanishing beneath the surface. By the time the ROV completed its survey of the bow section, the atmosphere on the research vessel had shifted. There was no celebration, no sense of conquest or discovery, only quiet awe and reverence. After nearly 5 decades, the ship had revealed something vital. Not everything, not all the answers, but enough to shift the weight of theory toward a sobering truth. The Edmund Fitzgerald wasn't struck down by some unknowable force. It was undone, slowly and silently, by overlooked vulnerabilities, by a missing vent, failing clamps, and a storm that gave no mercy. Why this discovery terrifies experts. The findings from the underwater drone did more than confirm a long-standing theory. They sent a ripple of discomfort through the maritime engineering world. To casual observers, a few missing hatch clamps and a shattered air vent might seem like minor flaws. But to shipbuilders, naval historians, and seasoned mariners, these are catastrophic red flags. For a freighter the size of the Edmund Fitzgerald, 729 feet long, carrying over 26,000 tons of iron ore pellets, structural redundancy is critical. The loss of watertight integrity isn't just a weakness, it's a death sentence. One of the ship's most respected modern interpreters, a naval architect from the University of Michigan, reviewed the footage and sighed deeply before saying, "That ship was flooding at the deck level. There was no way back from that." The Fitzgerald's design, while considered robust in the 1950s, lacked certain protections that would be expected today. The cargo hatches were designed to be sealed with 22 clamps apiece, but they had no continuous gasket system or secondary water barriers. This meant their integrity relied entirely on proper sealing and clamp function. If even one clamp failed and the hatch began to flex under pressure, water could pour in through the smallest gap. And then there was the vent pipe. The broken pipe revealed by the drone was likely the vent that Captain McSorley referred to in his final communications with the Arthur M. Anderson. Vents were designed to allow airflow into the cargo hold, preventing pressure buildup as ore was loaded or shifted. But if the vent pipe was ripped off or torn away by waves, it became a direct, unguarded pathway for water to rush into the hold. According to simulations later run by the research team, a sheared vent combined with compromised hatch clamps could allow up to 4,000 gallons of water per minute into the hold during the storm conditions present on November 10, 1975. At that rate, the forward ballast would be overwhelmed in less than 30 minutes. The bow would begin to dip. And as it dipped, it would take on more water until it reached a critical angle and simply nosedived beneath the surface. This terrifying cascade effect fits eerily well with eyewitness reports from the Arthur M. Anderson, which had been tracking the Fitzgerald on radar. Crew members on the Anderson described the Fitzgerald disappearing from the screen within a single sweep of the radar. One moment she was there, holding her own, and the next she was gone. But it also explains something else that's haunted investigators for decades: the total silence. The Fitzgerald never sent a mayday. No distress flares were fired. There was no SOS, no final order, no desperate radio call from the bridge. If flooding began rapidly through a broken vent or failed hatch, it could have gone unnoticed at first. The ship may have continued plowing forward in the storm, unaware that her bow was slowly sinking beneath the waves. By the time the list became visible or dangerous, it would have been far too late. The bow, heavy with water and ore, would have pulled the ship under in a matter of seconds, possibly breaking her in two as the stern tried to stay afloat. "There's no villain here," said a marine historian involved in the dive. "There was no sabotage, no explosion, no ghostly curse. The real terror is that everything appeared normal right up to the moment it wasn't." What unnerved the researchers most was the realization that this kind of failure was preventable. Not in 1975, perhaps, when regulations were less stringent and inspections less rigorous. But today, such vulnerability would be deemed unacceptable. Modern bulk freighters include double hull protections, stronger hatch seals, reinforced deck venting systems, and real-time flooding sensors. The Edmund Fitzgerald, though mighty in name and stature, sailed without many of these safeguards. One of the expedition's safety officers summed it up bluntly. She was massive, but she wasn't indestructible. And that's the lesson that makes this discovery so disturbing. She didn't have to sink. The Coast Guard's original report in 1977 had pointed to hatch failure as a likely cause, but it had been met with intense pushback. Crew families, unions, and shipping companies pushed back hard against any suggestion of operator error or negligence. They believed their loved ones had done everything right. But the ship itself had been sailing with aging components, and in the chaos of that November storm, even the best crew couldn't stop the flood they didn't see coming. The underwater drone's footage changed the conversation. Not only did it reveal physical proof supporting the hatch failure theory, it did so in a way that no longer blamed the men on board. Instead, it pointed to material fatigue, design limits, and the fury of nature as the true culprits. Within days of releasing preliminary images to marine experts, the expedition team began receiving requests from maritime museums, universities, and even the National Transportation Safety Board. Everyone wanted to see the footage, and when they did, they all came to the same chilling conclusion. The Fitzgerald didn't break in half because of a mysterious force. She broke because she was already dying, and the lake finished the job. The long-held theory confirmed. For nearly 5 decades, the cause of the Edmund Fitzgerald's sinking had remained elusive, trapped beneath waves and conflicting reports. While the U.S. Coast Guard's 1977 investigation concluded that ineffective hatch covers allowed water to flood the holds, the theory was widely disputed as it laid the blame solely on the crew. Critics argued that the ship was well maintained, that her crew was experienced, and that no single piece of evidence conclusively proved hatch failure. Other theories emerged, that the Fitzgerald struck an uncharted shoal, that rogue waves overwhelmed her, or that a sudden structural fracture snapped her in two on the surface. All had merit. None had closure. But now, for the first time, visual proof from the lakebed aligned directly with the Coast Guard's original assessment. The drone's footage, unfiltered and eerily quiet, showed clamps that had failed or were missing entirely. A destroyed vent pipe, warped hatch edges with sediment trails indicating water entry. These weren't just clues, they were confirmations. Marine engineers reviewing the footage agreed. The physical evidence strongly suggested progressive flooding through compromised hatches and vent openings. This slow breach likely caused the bow to ride dangerously low in the water, pulling the freighter into a fatal plunge that broke her spine and snapped her in two. Most heartbreaking of all, the crew likely had no idea how fast their situation had deteriorated. One expert commented, "This wasn't a catastrophic mystery. It was a slow-motion tragedy hiding in plain sight." Importantly, this confirmation didn't place blame on the crew. In fact, it vindicated them. The clamps were part of the ship's aging structure, responsibilities of the shipping company and regulators. Captain McSorley and his crew did what mariners always do. They trusted the vessel they were given. The findings are prompting renewed discussions about maritime safety, historical accountability, and how quickly assumptions become folklore. The Edmund Fitzgerald will always be a symbol of nature's power, of human limits, and now of the dangers of ignoring small vulnerabilities. And it raises a broader question, one not limited to ships or storms. If something critical in your life began failing silently, would you notice in time? Or would you, like the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, keep moving forward, unaware you were already sinking? What signs are you overlooking? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more mysteries uncovered.